Hi, my name is David Brown. I have been doing videos on toy dinosaurs and some other things. I'm doing this video to go with another I had posted on the same day on movies, and this will be a follow up to the first dinosaur video I did. In that video, I talked about this dinosaur, which I nominate as the worst ever made. Now, here is the one that would definitely give it a run for its money. I call this the Hideous Abomination, and it's one of the most notorious dinosaurs out there, in no small part because people won't stop making it. And just how it got to be this bad, where it came from, is something I'm going to get to. Uh, but as usual, I really need to start with some backstory. Now, back in the 1950s, Marx introduced a line of dinosaurs, and initially that included three really big molds. Uh, and this was one they created for a Tyrannosaurus. Uh, and for this particular one, it's a reissue from around the early 90s that I had literally just received today. You can see pretty well that this is not just dated, but just not very good. I would say it's the worst dinosaur Marx ever did. You can see it from the sides and head on. Now, even with this, there's one thing they did right, which is that it does have two fingers, not three, which we didn't know for sure for a while. Beyond that, they really did just about everything wrong. Besides the tripod stance, it's got this huge belly. It's got teeth not like any dinosaur, especially with the fangs right in the front. And the whole thing just looks goofy, which is not what you'd usually get from vintage Marx. So this was pardon me. This was retired. People debate. Many people just think that it was retired along with a couple other very large early Marx dinosaurs because it took up too much plastic. Maybe they were already thinking it didn't look that good. Either way, you have to say they made the right decision. And what they did was replace it with a much more gracile Tyrannosaurus, even a little far in the other direction, maybe making it look a little too light. I don't have an example of one of those, but here's one that's close. It's an MP dinosaur from late 50s or 1960s that I'm absolutely confident was based on the Marx second version of the Tyrannosaurus. It looks a little goofy compared to Marx, but the original definitely looked better. Uh, with the hands, you can't necessarily tell if it's two or three fingers, but then the main characteristic is that it had one foot lifted, and that is shared with the Marx enough to really prove that one was copied from the other. It was supposed to look dynamic, but if you look at either an NPC or Marx dinosaur, it really looked a bit awkward. The way the dinosaurs from Marx looked best was when they were in a more static pose with what you'd call a majestic look. And here's one more for context. I got this from a set from a Walmart that was mostly copies of Marx. It looks like it has 3 fingers, so it's not really a Tyrannosaurus, but it still looks pretty good, and you can think of dinosaurs that it looks pretty close to. Call it an Allosaurus, an Albertosaurus, an Alioramus, and it would be fine. Now, then there's these, and as I've already mentioned, the big problem here is just how many of these things I have. This is possibly the first one I would have gotten from the same Walmart set as this guy. And here's where you can see everything that's wrong. You've got 3 fingers, the arms are a mismatch, and the feet are just so terribly done, it couldn't be reconciled with a living creature. If something was this messed up, it would just die in infancy. You've got 3 fingers on one foot that's turned sideways. Then you've got this sort of frog foot that's still completely misshapen and mismatched toes. And it looks like the leg doesn't even reach out all the way to the ground except for the one really long toe. I can actually kind of get this to stand up in my hand. I had done this before the video. You can see he's supported mostly if I'm holding on to the tail, and this is just my hand, not a more solid flat surface. And then even the head just looks odd. It's got these weird ears that look almost like tiny mammal ears. And one more thing, with the eyes, a lot of the time they get this wrong. It'll be off center, or you can see with the other eye, it's barely even within the eye socket, more on the eye brow ridge. And here's another one. It's a little better. The eyes are in about the right place with the paint. It's got some detail on the back you can see. It's also a different kind of plastic. This guy bends just a little. If you go back to this one, it is a lot more flexible plastic. So this was probably cheaper, though this guy might be a little more prone to breaking. And here's one more we already saw from a bag of mainly Marx clone dinosaurs I did a previous episode on. And here you can really see, even with the eyeballs, the people doing this just did not care. Yeah, that's even further off than the other ones we've seen. And it's not even a solid circle, just a sort of speck, like almost like a comma rather than a circle or a dot. Yes, and as far as how this compares, here again is what I've described as the worst dinosaur, and I base that based on some pretty obvious issues with how it was made, especially how asymmetrical it is. This is asymmetrical in its own way, but beyond that, there's no obvious issues, or if there are, it's more with how it's made. But even as a design, the thing here is that there are different degrees of bad. With the Marx dinosaurs, they are outdated now. They might have been a little old school even when they came out, but they're 70 years old, so who's to say we would do any better? Or there's the patchisaurs, which this sometimes gets grouped in with. The thing with the patchisaurs is they look like goofy fantasy monsters because they are goofy fantasy monsters. And going to the patchisaurs, there's been people calling this a patchisaur, but I would really have to stand out in defense of the patchisaurs. The patchisaurs are the kind of bad that's harmlessly bad. If you're taking them as a serious reconstruction, you've already missed the point. This, however, is clearly designed after a dinosaur and after what was a decent reconstruction for the 60s or 70s, and they still did everything possible wrong. And for that, you could say this could be the worst dinosaur ever made. I would still stand out for this, but I could respect you. And what is certainly inexcusable, again, is that this has been in some of the same sets as these guys. And this is vastly, vastly better, even for, and it's just not even from a major toy maker, just a direct-to-Walmart set. Yes, and overall then, when this was made, the best guess is sometime in the 1970s, probably not earlier, rather later than the 80s. It might have been excusable if it had been done once. It would have been just a freaky, not so good psychedelic dinosaur. But to keep making this over decades, that's inexcusable, and you can't even blame that on the people who made it. They might have had an excuse, but the people who keep making this, when we have good dinosaur designs like this, or even a still memorable design like this, is inexcusable. And that's my rant for today on dinosaur toys. I definitely will be following up with more. For now, I'm signing out.